Hello and welcome, and this is Peter. The very first thing I would like to do is say thank you very much for listening to this audio. I really appreciate you, so thank you very much for listening. Today, this audio, I'm going to talk about a distinction called rackets. That's what we call them. They're called rackets. So today's audio is about the distinction called rackets. So let's start out with what is a racket? Okay, and it's not Martina Navratilova playing tennis with a tennis racket, showing my age there, or Bjorn Borg or Jimmy Connors and these guys hitting a ball with a racket. It's not that sort of racket. It's a different sort of racket. It's a sort of racket you may have seen in old movies or heard about. Let's say, for example, in the bootlegging era in the United States, when alcohol was prohibited, right? So when alcohol was prohibited, trying to stop men from drinking alcohol, that's a pretty silly thing to do. So what happened? Well, men would create these places for men to go to, say card playing house or something else like that. There'd be some establishment of entertainment set up for men that would ostensibly be alcohol free because, hey, you can't sell alcohol because alcohol's been prohibited, right? So they'd set something up, and then out the back they'd have a bar where they'd sell the men alcohol, right? And there'd be guys out the front keeping eyes to make sure that if the police came along that they'd have enough warning to put things away and that sort of thing. But the racket was, there was something out the front which looked legal and looked legitimate, and then out the back was something not legal or not legitimate, not looking so good. Carrying on from the looking good analogy. Now I'll give you a really funny example of something that looks like a racket, okay? Because this actually happened to me in Hong Kong. In 1987. In 1987, I was working in Hong Kong for 3 months, and it was a Friday afternoon, and it's about 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, in fact. And people were getting ready to leave because we'd been at this for a long time, at this project for a long time, and we could now start leaving at normal time. So it was 5 or 6 o'clock on a Friday, and we were going to leave shortly, and we were just talking in a group, and someone said to me, "What do you intend to do this weekend, Peter?" And because we'd been working our tails off for so long, I hadn't had a haircut in like 8 or 9 weeks. It was been a real while since I'd had a haircut. I got my hair cut short before I left, so that when I arrived, I'd be looking the IBM part. So like a few days before I left to go on this assignment, I'd had my hair cut nice and short like I like. But now after 8 or 10 weeks or whatever it was, my hair was looking a little ratty. I've got to say. My hair was looking a little ratty, a little long for me. So I innocently said, well, I think I'll go and get a haircut. And there was like this hush come over the group. And people looked really, really worried. And then one of the guys just started killing himself laughing. And I'm like, what did I say? Like, truly, I am going to go and get a haircut. But what did I say? And everybody could see from the look on my face that I had no idea that I had misspoken in any way, shape or form. And this one guy's killing himself laughing, and then everybody else starts laughing. When they realized that I had no idea what it was that I'd said, everyone just started laughing at me. And so I'm standing there going, oh, okay, well, this is going to be good. What does "I'm going to get a haircut" mean in Hong Kong? and after this guy... Long Yu, I think his name was. Long, we used to call him. He finally said, "You don't know what it is you said, do you?" And I went, "Well, no. I am sincere. Like, look at my hair. It's long. I am going to get a haircut." He said, "Yes, but in Hong Kong, prostitution is illegal. you're not allowed to pay women for sex in Hong Kong. Prostitution is illegal. So in Hong Kong, all the brothels are behind barber shops. Okay? And I'm like, and the euphemism in Chinese in Hong Kong, if you're going to go and see a prostitute, is I'm going to go and get a haircut. So when you say I'm going to go and get my haircut, what we heard was I'm going to visit a prostitute on the weekend. And of course I laughed and go, okay, well, fine. Obviously I don't know that's the meaning of it. By the way, I do have a girlfriend I love very much, and I wouldn't go and visit a prostitute. But, such is life. Now, in that story, of course, the barber shop out the front gives a legitimate, good reason for men to be coming and going through the front of the shop. They're going to get a haircut. And in fact, many of them will get their haircut at the time, right? Just to add a little bit more realism to it. So the barber shop is the legitimate business, the racket, okay, something that looks good. And out the back, you've got the brothel, you've got the prostitutes, right? Which is illegal, which looks less good, okay? So that's what a racket is. A racket is something that you put out in front if something seedy or untoward or not very nice is happening in the background. You put the racket out the front to demonstrate your goodness, your good works, to provide legitimacy for what's going on out the back. Okay? And the same for gambling and alcohol. What do many men like? Many men like gambling, alcohol, and women. Let's say. Those are three rather popular pastimes for many men: gambling, alcohol, and women. So that's what a racket is. That's the definition of it. So how does it apply to people? Well, people who are constantly doing something not very nice and then making up excuses for why it is that they're doing this not very nice thing, right? So, for example, you may know somebody who's a bit of a gossip, who spreads rumors about people, okay? But if you challenge this person on being a bit of a gossip, they'll have an excuse for it, they'll have a reason for it, and it'll sound good. For example, it's, I'm just trying to protect people from those in our society that would do them harm, right? I'm just trying to do that. I'm not being a gossip just for gossip's sake. I'm actually trying to help people know who could do them harm in our society. You might hear that, right? Or today, and it's late 2018, we have this concept called social justice warriors, who are constantly going on about the goodness in their hearts, and in order to implement their goodness, what they want to do is get the government to go and violently assault people and throw them in jail, right? Or, I believe in freedom of speech, but I vehemently oppose hate speech, and hate speech is anything that I disagree with, right? And in 2018, there has been rather an explosion of this whole social justice warrior thing, where they claim to be wanting to be doing good, but their actions speak otherwise, right? So this social justice warrior thing is the racket, and then what they really want behind that is power and control and the ability to inflict harm, injury and loss on other people. It's like the famous case of the gay couple demanding that a Christian baker bake them a custom-made wedding cake, right? And claiming that if the Christian baker will not bake them a custom-made wedding cake for gays, that he's somehow bigoted against them. And the force of the government should be used to force them to bake that cake, or they should be put out of business. The racket is, I'm so tolerant, I'm so wonderful, I'm so supportive of the gay community that I'm willing to destroy somebody else's life if they don't buy into my ideology, right? I'm wonderful, I'm fantastic, I'm supporting a so-called oppressed community, and if somebody doesn't agree with me, I should get the violence and force of the government to destroy their income earning ability. Can you see the racket there? Can you see that on one side they're claiming their virtue and how good they are, but what they're willing to do to demonstrate how good they are is to destroy somebody else's life? Can you see how shady that is? Can you see how nasty that is? Let me give you another example, which of course is now very famous, and that is the pedophilia inside the Catholic Church, right? So one of the things you will find, almost inevitably, is wherever people are touting their good works very loudly for everyone to hear, those people who are touting their good works very loudly for everyone to hear, the good piece out the front, the racket, well, very often behind all that touting of all these good works is something a little less salubrious going on. And in the Catholic Church, of course, it was the raping of boys by the Catholic priests. So the Catholic priests were all pious and we're so good and we care about everybody and we're here to share our life and dedicate our life to the benefit of our community and our congregation. And, you know, we're your channel to God, and we're going to introduce the Bible for you. And this is all self-sacrifice. And if you say anything against us, then you must be a blasphemer and hate God and Jesus, and not want us to do these good works. Well, at the very same time, they're raping small boys, right? And in some cases, teenage boys, raping boys and teenage boys, young boys and teenage boys. So that's the racket. The racket is putting something good out in front, where behind something not so good is going on, right? Now, people tend to do this. People tend to run rackets, particularly when they're challenged on something that they've done that's a little less salubrious than what they might have otherwise done, right? So when you challenge a person on, well, why did you do this thing that's not so good by your opinion, what will often come back from the other person is a racket. Well, I'm just trying to help people. You know, I'm a gossip and I spread gossip, but I'm actually just trying to help people, right? Or, you know, when someone undermines you, when someone lies about you, spreads rumors about you, and you go and confront them about that, they will make up some story that has them presented in a better light. Okay? And one of the best rackets of all of late is playing the victim. Okay? Where somebody does something to provoke a reaction, and when the reaction happens, then they play the victim of the reaction. Now, a common one in this case is lying about people, slandering people, and then when the slander is pointed out, claim to be the victim. And women do this very well. When women have lies that they've told pointed out, well then they're the victim of misogyny. They're the victim of patriarchy. And they're holier than thou, and they need to be protected as the victim class, right? That's what rackets are about. Rackets are about people. The rackets that I'm talking about are about people. where the person does something, right? Something perhaps not very nice, and then when challenged on that something, they will come out with the story about how virtuous and lovely and wonderful they are in general. Because how many people do you know, gentlemen, that when you challenge them on something that they've done, the very first thing out of their mouth is, well, yes, I did do that, and that was a bad thing, and I take responsibility for that, and it's my fault, I did the wrong thing, and I want to apologize to you, and how can I make it up to you? How many people do you know that's their first response when you challenge them on something that they did that's not so lovely? Right? We know that the first response of owning up to what they did, admitting their sins, apologizing, promising to never do it again, and making any remedy or restitution that might make sense in that matter, in that situation. We know the people who do that as their first action are pretty rare, right? Those people are pretty rare. Most everyone else will come up with, oh, well, I have a good reason for that. This is my reason for that. And you will notice across your lifetime that their reason for doing that, it's always something, quote, good, end quote. It's always something that's socially acceptable, right? Their reason for doing this horrible thing, this bad thing, is always a good reason. They never come out with a bad reason for doing that bad thing, right? That's what rackets are, gentlemen. And I can tell you, people are addicted to rackets. They just love them. My goodness, they love them. People go around pretending to be holier than thou so often, while in the background they're stabbing each other in the back. They're undermining each other. This is situation normal amongst human beings, right? Where, these are the people who are nice and pleasant to your face and smile at you to your face, but as soon as you turn around, they'll stab you in the back. That's those people. Those people are running rackets. It's the old Pink Floyd song. You need to be trusted by the people that you lie to so that you can get close enough to stick the knife in. Right? You need to be trusted by the people that you lie to so that you can get close enough to them to stick the knife in. Well, how do they get close to you? They run a racket. Right? They run a racket, and you think they're genuine. And then when they're close enough to stab you in the back, they stab you in the back. And sometimes they stab you right in the front. Okay? That's what a racket is, and that's what it's for. Right? The purpose of a racket in this way of being human is to provide cover, camouflage if you like, for the things that you are doing which are just a little less salubrious, just a little more seedy, just a little less socially acceptable. The racket is to provide cover for your less than wonderful actions. And people are addicted to these. They love them. And, the number of people who during your lifetime will lie to your face and tell you all wonderful things only to stab you in the back when they've got a chance. That's a lot of people out there, gentlemen. That's a lot of people. A lot of people. And men like me, who have had even our wives do this to us, it's a lot of people, right? It's a lot of people who will tell you one thing to your face and then stab you in the back, right? Or stab you in the front. when they're feeling really confident, right? That's what a racket is, gentlemen. So keep your eyes out for these things. Keep your eyes out for these things, because people run these all the time. And very often, people are so adept at running them, they're very hard to spot. This is why one of the reasons when you're selling, if you stop and think about it, rackets are so prevalent across human societies, where people are saying one thing, he spoke with a forked tongue, saying one thing and doing another, that people have become very attuned to noticing when the actions of a person, including their body language and the way they're presenting themselves, is in any way incongruous or out of alignment with what it is that they're saying, right? So because you've been in the situation, you've been buying something from someone, and they've been giving you the sales pitch, and you've noticed that the body language and what's coming out of their mouth hasn't matched up. You've noticed that across your lifetime, right? Well, that's a person who's trying to run a racket out in front, trying to look good out in front, trying to convince you that everything's legitimate out in front, but behind, they know they're lying, they know they're being deceitful, right? And men in particular, only about 4 or 5% of men are what's called a psychopathic liar. So a psychopathic liar is a person who can lie and know they're lying, right? They can lie and know they're lying and know they're trying to take advantage of the person that they're persuading to their opinion, and show no external signs of it, including heart rate and tension in the skin, etc. So those psychopathic liars can pass lie detector tests because they have no physiological response to lying, because they actually don't care. There's nothing there that when they lie in an attempt to take advantage of someone, there's nothing there to spark the physiological response that the rest of us have, the other 95, 96% of us have. Okay? So, for example, when I lie, I'm not very good at it, right? So I stopped when I was 5. And I might tell that story just at the end here. So there is 4 or 5% of men who are pathological liars, to the point of when they lie to you, you actually can't tell they're lying because they give no signals, no body language signals, no physiological signals that they are lying. And those men generally wind up being politicians, because that's a tremendous advantage. If you're going to be lying to people as a politician, to be able to do it without showing any sign is a tremendous advantage. That'll get you elected. Tony Blair is one of the great examples of a pathological liar. If you go and watch his speeches and watch what he said, when if you go and look at the speeches in his early days, when he knows what he was going to do and he knows that he's lying, there's no indication that he is, right? So there are people out there who can do that. But most men can't. 95% of men can't. 95% of men will show some symptom, some physiological symptom, that they are lying to you. And that's what we have. When somebody just doesn't look right, it just doesn't feel right, it just doesn't sound right, there's some incongruity in what it is that they're saying. What do we do, gentlemen? What do we do? Well, we don't buy from that guy in general, right? We say, this guy, I can't quite put my finger on it, but something's not quite right here, and I'm not going to do this deal with this guy, right? So that happens. So rackets, people, why do people use rackets? Because they're of benefit to the individual using them in the majority of cases. and they're of some cost to the person who's subjected to them in the majority of cases. That's kind of how they work. So the Catholic priest who's running the racket of, I'm so pious and I'm so helpful and I care about my flock so much, that's the racket out the front, while he's, doing his thing with young boys out the back, right? Those priests, many of them would be pathological liars, right? Because that would help in that position. So the priests are on the beneficiary side of the racket, and the young boys were on the non-beneficiary side of those rackets. So as you're going around the world, gentlemen, as you're working in deals, remember, other people will be running rackets on you. Okay? Now, what you might not like to hear is you might be doing this yourself. And we'll deal with this in a little bit further in an audio about integrity. But you might be doing a little bit of this yourself. In your sales processes, let's say, for example, in your sales processes, you might be doing a little bit of being, let's say, economical with the truth. Okay? Let's just call it economical with the truth. There are cases, oh my God, shock and horror. There are cases when salesmen are just a little bit economical with the truth, let's say. And they put a good story out there, but they know that they're misleading their customers. They know they're lying. Well, guess what happens, gentlemen? Guess what happens if you were ever one of those salesmen, which I'm sure you were never. I'm sure you never, ever, ever were economical with the truth in trying to get a deal. I'm sure you would never do that, right? Well, what, unless you're a pathological liar, what did you do? You gave off signals that you were not being honest about something, right? If you've been in a sales situation and you are being economical with the truth, worse, if you're telling blatant lies, unless you are a pathological liar, of which only 4 to 5% of men are, you would have given off some level of signals that you were misleading the customer. Your racket would have been showing just a little bit. Maybe not much, maybe a fair bit, depending on how good you were at that, right? So, rackets are commonly used by salesmen to present the very best picture for the customer, and in some cases we all know there's some unethical salesmen selling not very good products, right? And we're wary of that situation, and your audience, when you go out selling, they're very wary of that situation as well. So if you are running a racket, if you are not being quite so honest, if you are running your looking good and your looking good is using you, and refer to a prior audio if you don't know what a looking good is, that can be enough. That alone, gentlemen, can be enough to lose you that deal. The incongruity between your body language and what it is that you're saying and what it is that you're presenting, if the racket that you're running becomes noticeable, even subconsciously or unconsciously, to your audience, your chance of closing that deal goes down dramatically. Very dramatically, right? So although rackets are used by people to get what it is that they want, covering up the less than salubrious stuff they're doing in the background, rackets in the sales situation can have a very significant cost, and they're very much best avoided. Just don't use them. Just don't run them. Okay? But before you can don't use them and don't run them, you need to recognize when you are running a racket. You need to be able to recognize when are you doing and saying something and behaving in a way such as to obscure what you're really thinking and doing in the background, which may not be really that nice. You need to be able to identify these, gentlemen. And the best way to learn how to identify them is watch other people. Become a people watcher. Watch other people that you notice are saying one thing and doing another. Watch them and watch them closely. And you'll see the evidence of their rackets running. Because once you notice a racket is running, once you notice there's something not quite right about here, and you start watching closely, over a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, over a couple of years, you will become a master of noticing these things. You'll get really good at it. Okay? And as you get really good at noticing rackets in other people, you'll get better at noticing rackets in yourself. And a word of warning, gentlemen, these guys who work in the purchasing departments of multi-billion-dollar firms, how many other salesmen do you think they've seen come in to their office running rackets? Right? These people who consistently work on large deals, how many bad salesmen do you think that they've seen? How well attuned do you think they are at picking up when somebody's not being honest, when somebody's trying to hide something? How good do you think they are at it, gentlemen? And if you've never thought about that before, let me tell you, they're really good. Okay? They're really good at it. So you don't want to be trying to put one past these guys. You want to be honest. Okay? In as much as you can be honest. Because every offer has some weaknesses. You don't want to talk about the weaknesses. What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about what it is the prospect needs to hear in order to buy what it is that you're selling. That's what you want to talk about. And you can talk about that honestly. Okay? You don't have to avoid anything in those conversations. Now, I wanted to tell you just a funny story at the end of this audio about trying to be dishonest, trying to lie, trying to deceive my parents when I was a little boy. Okay? Because we all know that little boys, little boys will do things like drink from the milk bottle rather than pour it into a glass. Little boys kind of do that sort of thing. Or little boys, as dinner is coming along, will sneak some biscuits because the little boy's really hungry right before dinner. Or sneak in an apple or an orange or something else like that. Little boys, gentlemen, have been known to take food without asking for it, drink milk out of the bottle, and all those sort of things, right? And of course, our mothers have to teach us that's not okay. If you want to have a piece of fruit, you have to ask me first, ask my permission, and you only get to have the piece of fruit if you ask my permission. If you want a glass of milk, you have to ask my permission, and you have to pour it into a glass and not drink out of the milk bottle, right? Our mums taught us this when we were little boys. And, like little boys, sometimes we don't follow the rules. Now, in our house, as it was, if you broke one of the rules, and you realized you broke one of the rules, if we went to our mum and admitted that we'd broken the rule and apologized for it, and promised to do better, promised not to do that again, we would get one of whatever the punishment for that was. So let's say I was 5 and it was near dinner time and I was hungry and I snuck a banana because I was hungry. And I knew if I asked my mum for the banana, she'd say no because it's almost dinner time. But I'm just so hungry. I just want that banana, right? So I sneaked the banana without asking. Well, in our house, sneaking a banana was one spank. sneaking a piece of food without asking for it was worth one spank, okay, on our little bottoms. Now, if I didn't immediately, after eating the banana, feel sorry and guilty, if I didn't immediately go to my mother and say, Mum, I've done the wrong thing. I was really hungry and I knew if I asked for a banana, you'd tell me no. So I didn't ask you and I took the banana anyway. And I know that I'm not supposed to do that, but I was really hungry and I know that I did the wrong thing and I'm sorry and I'll do better next time. I won't do that again. I'm sorry, Mum. Well, my mum would give me one spank, right? But if Mum comes by the fruit bowl and goes, there's a banana missing here. Did anybody here have a banana? Now, if I was there and I said, no, I didn't have a banana. If Mum said, did anybody here have a banana? If she had to ask the question, and I was there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get caught. I'm going to put my hand up and say, yes, I had the banana. If she had to ask me to admit my transgression or sin, then I got double the punishment, right? So if that scenario played out where Mum noticed the banana was missing and then I admitted it, then I got 2 spanks, right? Now in the third scenario where my mum asked, did any of you boys have a banana? And I went, no, I didn't have a banana, right? And then she finds like a bit of banana in my mouth, or she finds the banana skin shoved under my bed or something else like that. And she figures out I ate the banana. And of course, your mummy is judge and jury, right? Then the punishment was 4 of whatever the punishment was. So if I tried to lie to my mother and get away with eating the banana, being questioned about it, I was going to get 4 spanks. Okay? And Mum would make sure that those spanks were a damn sight harder than the 1 spank that you might get for admitting what you did in the first place. Right? So by the time I was about 5, my mother had absolutely convinced me that she could read my mind. I was absolutely convinced that she could read my mind and she knew when I'd done something wrong. I was convinced of it. So every time I did something wrong, I would just say, oh, I've got to go and admit this to Mum, because as soon as I go near her, she can read my mind and she'll know that I've done something wrong, and I'm going to get 2 spanks instead of 1 spank. So I'm going to go and admit what I did wrong, right? So by the time I was like a 5-year-old little boy, I had completely given up on trying to lie to my mother and deceive her, because she had me totally convinced that she could read my mind as a 5-year-old, right? And the funny thing was, when my mum was in ill health towards the end of her life, I spent a month just sitting with her and talking with her. It was a really nice month. And I said to her, you know, I just don't know how you did it when I was a little boy. And we were talking about our whole life together, right, during this month. But you just had me absolutely convinced you could read my mind. And so by the time I was about 5, I just thought there's no point trying to lie to you about anything I did, because you could read my mind. And Mum just laughed at me. And I said, what are you laughing about? And she said, oh, you were always the worst of the 3 boys at lying. And I said, really? Why was I the worst at lying? She said, oh, ever since you were like 3 years old, every time you tried to tell a lie, you'd put your hands over your bottom because you knew the spank was coming. So you do that unconsciously. So whenever you lied to me, you put your hands over your bottom. It was obvious when you were lying, but I wasn't going to tell you that. I told you I could read your mind because I didn't want you to stop putting your hands over your bottom when you were lying. And she laughed at me, and I'm like, you are kidding me. Like, I actually put my hands over my bottom unconsciously? She said, yeah. Every time, when you were telling the truth, you stood your ground and you told the truth. But when you were lying, every time you put your hands over your bottom because you knew the spank was coming. I went, and you convinced me you could read my mind? She says, well, I sure as hell wasn't going to tell you that you were putting your hands over your bottom because that was your giveaway, right? And we laughed about it, and it was really very funny. It was a lovely moment, right? So my mum, even as when I was a very little boy, by the time I was 5, my mum, before I even went to kindergarten, my mum had me totally, completely, and utterly convinced she could read my mind. And it turned out that when I ran my little racket of lying out front, I put my hands over my little boy bottom because I knew the spank was coming. A dead giveaway to an adult, of course, right? Now, of course, not everyone is going to be as obvious as that when they're telling you a lie. They'll be practiced at it. They'll be good at it. But here's the thing. Here is a thing for you to think about. When you have the opportunity, when you're in the sales position, and you feel like you need to be, let's say, a little economical with the truth, maybe you'll reconsider now. Because maybe there's someone in your audience who will be more sensitive to your body language than what you might realize. And maybe that little being economical with the truth, maybe that running of a racket out in front of what you're really thinking and feeling might not be to your benefit in the sales situation. Okay? So I would encourage you to watch other people, look at the rackets they're running, look at how they try and justify what it is that they've done, particularly when they've done something not very nice, and learn from that so that you identify when you do that, and then maybe, just maybe, if you can identify when you are running rackets, maybe, just maybe, you want to not do that anymore in the sales situation. Okay? That's why rackets are important. Rackets are important in the sales situation such that you notice when you are running them and then perhaps make the choice to give them up because they will cost you deals. Somebody, unless you are a pathological liar and you've only got a 4 or 5% chance of being that, unless you are a pathological liar, it's best not to lie to your customers, not to try and run rackets in the face of your customers, because some people are quite attuned to noticing the behavior, even if it's not quite so obvious as a 4-year-old boy putting his hands over his bottom because he fears he's going to get a spanking for lying, right? You won't get a spanking for your lying, you just won't get the deal on many occasions. Okay? Now I know, gentlemen, I know that it seems like out there there's a bunch of people who do business, who are very economical with the truth, and they still get the business, right? I know that happens, okay? I know that happens. Such is life, okay? Is all I can say about that. Such is life. I would go, what did I do? I went down the path of having a little more integrity with my customers rather than trying to mislead or manipulate or lie to my customers in order to get the deal. Okay? That's the path I went down. And I fully acknowledge that there are plenty of salesmen out there who didn't go down the same path. There are plenty of salesmen out there who will take the position, say whatever you have to say in order to get the deal and, be damned with the consequences. In fact, we had a saying at IBM, never confuse selling with implementing, right? Never confuse selling with implementing. Sell the deal first, then figure out how you're going to implement it later if you haven't already figured that out, right? So that's one of the tensions in sales, gentlemen. One of the tensions in sales is how much do we want to, gloss over the less sellable features within our proposal? How much do we want to gloss over that in order to get the deal, right? And that's a judgment call. And you have to be comfortable with it. You have to be okay that, yes, this is how to go forward, because if you're not comfortable with it, it'll come across. Okay? If you're not comfortable with it, it'll come across and it might cost you the deal. Okay? So with that, gentlemen, thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.